The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondel.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Stage Door Show. This is Dave Hondel. Tonight, my guests are two wonderful filmmakers who write, produce, and direct some amazing projects through the production company that they founded called Small Tall Productions. They've had great success in the film festival circuit with some of their work, like features 2-11 and Surprise, which have secured distribution, and you can watch these films on streaming platforms everywhere. We're so happy they're with us tonight, so please welcome Rosie Grace and Nate Hapke. Welcome to you both.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
Fun.
Yeah. I really want to start with this, Surprise. I watched some of the movie today, and I'm excited to watch the whole thing with my wife, but one of the things that I noticed, and it just blew me away, really. I see a lot of independent films, but technically this one was, I mean, besides the great acting, and it was actually the comedic timing was great. I really liked the writing, and we'll talk to you about that in a little bit. But technically speaking, I mean, the sound was amazing. The cinematography was amazing. And it just, when something is so well shot and the sound is good, it doesn't distract you from the story. And I wanted to talk to you, being independent filmmakers, that I think some people overlook stuff like that when they're, obviously a good story is a good story, but if it's not distracting, it allows you to really involve yourself with the story and not have to worry about, oh my gosh, why does it sound different when they go from this shot to this shot? And yours was just spot on. And so there's a lot that goes on with post-production. Let's talk about the technical aspect of your film, because I thought it was amazing.
Thank you first. Yeah. It's so special to have that recognized. You work really hard on all the little things so that people don't notice them, like you just said. Yeah. And so when you notice it for the right reasons, that's a huge compliment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first and foremost, we have to start with our incredible production team.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, Sandra, Joanne Perez Tejeda, and her boom operator, Eric Hahn. They were incredible on set.
That's our sound team.
Our sound team.
And then Justin Levins, our post-sound mixer. Between that team, they absolutely hit it out of the park.
Yeah. We've worked with different, I mean, to your point, in terms of things that take you out of it, in our experience, what we have seen is that, yes, good writing is good writing. And sometimes you can, especially in the indie world, you can get away with shooting something maybe on a lesser camera, but the thing that is going to make your film stand out like a sore thumb is going to be bad audio. And so we've always tried to prioritize, regardless of what, camera we were shooting on. And fortunately, our director of photography has a great camera that he was willing to let, production use. And he obviously knows how to operate it beautifully. We rented some great, lenses to put on that. But over time, we've been able to build this really great relationship with our production sound team and our post-production sound team. Justin Levins, who did the post-sound, he actually was also the post-sound re-recording mixer for our first feature as well. And it makes such a difference, to your point. I mean, just about that consistency, that level of professionalism, and that starts with them. And so it's all, our hats are off to them for lending their talents and doing it so efficiently and professionally.
It is. And it's so special for so many reasons, because we've been working with these people, each project you do, you get to bring new people into the fold. You really get to hone in on building your dream team. And we're lucky because this is our second feature film, and we've made a bunch of short films. And so over the course of making all those, not only have we been able to learn how to make things look and sound as good as they can, sometimes they're easy lessons where you're like, wow, that went great. And sometimes they're hard lessons where you're watching it screen in a theater and you're like, oh, we could have done better. So that's the first part that comes with that. And then the second part is, on each project, you add new people, you meet new people, you get to build that team. And we're so lucky to have really be so dialed in with such a great crew.
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with communication in terms of making sure that we understand that the language that these people are speaking, and what they need from us in terms of communicating what is the coverage in the scene, how many people are in the scene, how long do you have to set up, and realizing that once you set that tone from the very beginning in pre-production, making sure that everybody's prepared for whatever's going to happen, then when you show up on set, obviously it's wonderful that these people are professional, but all of this communication ahead of time and this preparation ahead of time, when you show up on set, it just becomes this efficient, wonderful, experience for everybody involved, which is really great. And I think that's how we always like it to be, where everybody feels very important, because I mean, especially in a lot of the scenes in Surprise, it's an ensemble piece. Sometimes some of these scenes have 15 people in them. And so understanding, through those conversations with Sandra, I was able to understand the max capacity that she's able to do on any one setup. And so that helps me know how many people I can block for in this setup, in this setup, in this setup, in terms of their audio coverage. And so but I would not necessarily know that unless I have that, but also like she feels comfortable and confident to communicate that to me, so that it's not like, oh, she's making me an imposition. It's like, no, I want to make sure that we are all in a position to succeed. And that starts with the communication and pre-production.
I think people that are in filmmaking can attest to this. There's nothing worse than having a set full of actors, especially a lot of them. I've been in this situation where there's nothing going on and everybody's looking at you, the director, the producer. Okay, what are we doing next? Bring a book, go sit in the corner and read while I set this up. There's a lot going on, I think, and it's the last thing you need to do is entertain people, right? But I'm going to turn to you, Rosie, on this one, because I just wanted to find out, as a writer, looking at your story, I mean, there might be, some cases maybe where something, maybe the way it was written doesn't always work when you're in actual, production piece of it, the principal photography. So as a writer, director, you guys both, how do you navigate that? Because sometimes it's not always, sometimes an actor might have an idea that might work better. So how do you navigate stuff like that when you have to change it up a little bit just for the betterment of the film?
It's a great question, because it's one of those lessons that I mentioned. Some of them are easy, some of them are hard. When I first started, making stuff with people in college and I was a writer, I was incredibly precious about my scripts. And it was to the point where it was to the detriment of the project, because scripts are living things.
Right.
And they, we always joke that our movies are like our children, right? Like whenever it's finished, it goes to festivals. And you think about it, it's like that script is, I guess, the elementary school version of it. And it has to grow into the movie it's going to be. And it's humbling but necessary to realize that there are going to be things that are going to happen that are going to change the film for the better. And they're not all going to come from you. And they shouldn't all come from you, because this really is a team effort. So in those scenarios, a lot of the time, it's nice for us because I produce on our projects as well as write alongside Nate. So I get to be involved and I get to be there if we need to retool things. And sometimes that's me needing to come in and work with Nate, and we'll fix a line that's not working. But sometimes that's also us being at rehearsal with the actors, and they have ideas, and that can really inform things and change it for the better. We also, with this one, knowing that it was a comedy, wanted to give our actors a little bit more space to play. Obviously, indie film timelines, we didn't have a ton of time for them to, just riff and improv, but we did have a chance to let them play a little bit more. There's a scene where two of the characters do sort of like a high school spirit cheer dance thing, and we kind of gave them some parameters and they just made the whole thing up and choreographed it in rehearsal. So you get great. Some of those best moments when you let it be collaborative and you don't hold on too tightly.
It's one of those things that the whole point in storytelling, at least in filmmaking, is to get to the truth. And I think when we sit down to write, there's this idea of, who are these characters? What are their relationships? What's the story about? But that's us just writing. And then one of the beautiful things about working with actors is that they're actors, and you're hiring them to do what they love doing, to inform it. And ultimately what you end up getting to, I mean, unless you're a director, writer, auteur, where you really, it's my way or the highway. This is very clearly my vision. I'm not that way. And so when I am rehearsing, I mean, rehearsal is a huge part of it, because as Rosie said, in terms of independent film timelines, and how much time you actually have on set, which is not a lot to experiment, I try to leave some room for flexibility, but because we have 27 setups this day and we need to get all of this coverage of these 15 people in this one scene, a lot of those conversations about the dialogue, about the timing, about the relationships, all that happens in pre-production, because I really don't want to waste any time on set. But ideally, through all of that work, all of that collaboration with the actors, they're figuring out how to inform that writing. And if something's not working, we have a conversation about it, that, Rosie and myself have a conversation with the actor, and we try to get to the truth of the situation. And a lot of the time it's I mean, my responsibility as a director is to have an answer for any question, any single question that anybody might have on set. I'm the leader. I need to set the tone. I need to have an answer, but I'm also always willing to be wrong, because one of the wonderful things about creating and about being a part of the, a team, like if I just wanted to create art by myself, I'd go paint with a canvas by myself. But I filmmaking because I get to make movies with other people, and I get to work with other talented people, and they get to share their talents for the thing. And ideally, we're all working on the same movie. It's not just Nate's movie, it's our movie.
Right.
So how can we all get to a shared truth? And that journey is what I love. So
yeah, I mean, it did very well at the film festivals. I know that New York Cinefest and Best Actor Bryce Harrow, and feature film, and also Best Actress Melanie Thompson, and some other awards or selections here in New York Cinefest, also North Hollywood Cinefest also. But my question is, when you go to a film festival and you see your work on a big screen, it's got to be amazing to sit there and see your work, and then also see the reaction from the audience, reacting to your words that were on paper at one point. So to see that on the screen, that's got to be gratifying as hell.
It's gratifying and it's scary. I was laughing with this one because our first feature was a drama. And I remember after we screened Surprise for the first time, I looked at Nate and I was like, oh, it's much scarier to screen a comedy for people than a drama, because if people are watching a drama and they're intense and they're focused on it, they're quiet and you're like, great, it's quiet, it's good.
It's supposed to be.
If you're watching a comedy, you're like, why aren't they laughing?
Yeah.
It's too
that
quiet.
was supposed to be a
they're
laugh.
not reacting. They're not laughing, and it's so much easier.
Yeah.
In your head in that case. But the nerves of it aside, it's a fantastic feeling to hear people laugh, to watch them figuring out what's happening and what's about to happen. Like I don't want to spoil things, but there's a big moment in Surprise where just some off the wall stuff happens and you can kind of see what's about to go. It's like planted a little bit.
Yeah.
And during our first screening, the entire audience kind of gasped and started doing like, oh no, he's not going to do it. It's like that kind of like,
I know exactly what part you're talking about.
Yeah, it was a good feeling. It was a really good feeling.
That's good.
Yeah, it's very interesting experience. As Rosie's talking about, I think you get to that's when the movie stops being yours, or at least like the perception of it's just for other people at that point. But so what I hold on to is like what it was like to make it. That experience you hope would get easier with time. It doesn't. I still get so nervous ahead of the screenings. And you're just like, man, wouldn't it be great if everybody just loved it? And I was like, Nate, that's not in your control. And at least I can listen to myself now. This movie in particular was really special. You mentioned the New York Cinefest where we had those nominations, and the North Hollywood Cinefest. It was really cool because this is the first time where at the North Hollywood Cinefest was our world premiere. We sold out a theater for a feature of ours. And it was awesome. Yeah. And it's what this comedy ensemble deserved, because the actors got to hear an entire theater laughing, and they all came to, see their work and appreciate their work, which was great. And then at the New York Cinefest, it was our first time screening in New York City. Ever. Yeah. And that was, so this movie had brought about two unforgettable festival experiences, which was so special. And it's just nice to have a partner to appreciate those things with. You can have team members and stuff like that to cheers with and stuff like it, but to navigate all of these challenges constantly on set, in pre-production, on set, in post-production, and then it's like, let's do the festival thing, hopefully we get distribution, and then to get to appreciate all of these new experiences so that it doesn't get old, it doesn't get stale. We get to feel like, wow, stuff is changing. This is
keep
new.
Feeling that with other projects, right? I mean, just keep going with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Been doing this for like 7 years and it's still not getting. So
one of the things I was going to ask you, because this is something obviously has been fresh out there, but the strike, the writer strike, the actor strike, and I know there was a lot of people out of work for a long time during that strike. But I would imagine that the indie film world, it could have been a good thing, because you can keep working and keep doing your thing and getting your work out. So what are your thoughts on that? And did that give you an opportunity, I guess, to continue to work and put out your art and not have to worry about like the industry standards that have to be met and all that?
A little bit yes and a little bit no. It was a weird and complicated time.
Yeah.
The basics of it are because it could have been really bad because it was happening when we were putting Surprise out. And that was when the strike was going on and when we were releasing it. And there could have been issues with screening it had we been part of a bigger studio film.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we were an independent project made under a really small agreement, and our project, because of that, wasn't struck. So our actors could promote the project, could come to the screening, could celebrate it. And we're so glad because they put so much incredible work into it. It would have been absolutely heartbreaking if they couldn't be there for it.
Yeah.
And it did give us a lot of time to, write and develop other ideas in the same way that the pandemic did. We wrote our first feature during lockdown, and very much in the same way, if you can't be making anything, at least you can be writing things. And that was definitely something that I think came out of the strike for us.
One of the things that was also really helpful was the fact that both of the screenings that the film ended up having were at festivals that did not have a pre-existing relationship with the AMPTP. So they were not struck events either, which was great. And we only ended up shooting one project during the strikes, and it was a short film. WGA doesn't necessarily care about that. SAG, the agreement that we signed with the actors was a non-struck, contract, and so we were just making sure that we could assuage any concerns from, our actors. The majority of our actor collaborators are all in the Screen Actors Guild, and they didn't want to do anything that was going to get a slap on the wrist. So we always made sure that whatever they were participating in, that they were free to do so without, penalty from their union, who's working hard on their behalf. So,
yeah. How did you? Also, go ahead. I'm sorry, Rosie.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just gonna say it was just the navigating the red tape while also finding ways to let the creativity thrive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's definitely a hard balance there. But I was going to ask you, how did you both get into filmmaking in the first place? There's got to be, the dream has to start somewhere, right? So how did you guys each get into filmmaking, and how did that love? How was that born?
You want to go first?
Sure. So I'm the youngest of three, and my siblings are all very funny. Both my parents have a good sense of humor, and I think there was a desire in me to keep up. And I think I really loved making people laugh. And so I asked my parents if I could try theater, and they said yes. And so, regional theater in Connecticut, I grew up in Connecticut, turned into classes in New York City, turned into an agent by the time I was 12 and 13, and going out for auditions in New York City, which was wild. And I just didn't really time, but my first love in all of this was acting. When I got to school, we both went to Syracuse, but we didn't start dating until we were both in LA.
And we didn't start making movies until way after that.
Really? Okay.
There's an introductory multimedia storytelling class that all of the communications majors have to take, and you were tasked with making 3 short films, and it was my first experience with directing with a camera in my hand, and I just fell in love with it. And so I never really looked back. I changed my major, because my original major at school was broadcast and digital journalism, to television, radio, and film, which is what I graduated with. And I just kept myself as busy as possible to learn as much as I could, because despite falling in love with directing, I knew that I didn't know that much. And so but I wanted to be as good as possible. And all of that comes from, sure, you can read about, best practices in textbooks, but that's really not how you learn how to be a director. That's not how you learn how to be a writer. You learn those things by doing them. And so I fully immersed myself in all the extracurriculars at SU. I collaborated with my friends on a sketch comedy group, just the 4 of us, and really discerned how I like to put stuff together, what was possible in any given amount of time. And yeah, by senior year, I had 2 short films under my belt that I was really proud of, that I still sort of consider the beginning of my more professional, projects. Actually, behind us are posters of all of our short films.
Wow.
And over here, we also have and over there, I can pan if you'd like, our 2 feature film posters.
That's really cool.
It's fun. I mean, my filmmaking journey, I consider began probably freshman year, as director began freshman year of college. And this wall began building probably my senior year of college. And then from there, it was just, how do I knew no one was going to hire me to write and direct, but I knew that I wanted to keep writing and directing. And so I got my first experience with crowdfunding in my senior year of college, and realized, if I want to keep making stuff at a certain quality, let me start crowdfunding until I can, start to put my own money into it. And it just kind of snowballed from there. Kept on meeting more and more people. And then, Rosie and I started collaborating, and that's where I'll stop. And then you can tell your
I'll
journey.
pick it up because they meet in the middle.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So as a child, I was obsessed with behind the scenes features on DVDs.
Yeah.
Namely, the Lord of the Rings extended editions had these like hours and hours of content about how they made the movies.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so cool. And I thought it was so fascinating. And I watched them like again and again and again. But it didn't register for me that those were real jobs. Like I was obsessed with the idea of them, but it never clicked for me that it was something I could do. And I always enjoyed writing. So I figured, I'll go to school for English and then I'll go into some sort of MFA creative writing program. And so I went to college. I'm at Syracuse. I'm an English major. And within my first semester, so many people asked me if I was planning to be either an English teacher or a librarian, as though there were no other options.
Right.
That caused me to freak out a little bit because I also was realizing that, writing on your own is fun, but I'm a very social person. I like to work as part of a team. I like to bounce ideas off of people. And so when it clicked for me that I was going to a school with a really good film and production program, and all of the jobs that I had been so obsessed with the idea of as a kid were real jobs, I was like, oh, everything kind of clicked into place. I can do this. This is what I've always, wanted to do, just didn't have a name for it.
Yeah.
And so I transferred into that program, had a couple classes with Nate, but we didn't really become close or anything. I don't think you ever really get close with the people when you start, when your first introduction is a group project, because we were both, trying to lead the group and it butted heads a little bit. But then we graduated and we both moved out to LA. And I remember one night when we were just hanging out in a big group of friends, I offhandedly said like, oh, I like to write, you like to direct, we should make something at some point. And then a little more time went by and then life happens and we started dating. And we said, okay, it would be great to collaborate, but let's get steady in this first. Let's give it a year. And so we decided to date for a year before we made anything together, just so we had a solid foundation, because dating is hard, but you know what else is hard? Is trusting other people with your creative ideas and compromising. So we built our foundation, then we started making things together, and been doing it for about 7 years now. And dog, an apartment, a wedding, and a couple of movies later, here we are.
We've made 8 short films and 2 features together. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. It really is. I mean, and that's one of the questions I was going to ask you. Being a couple, with the 2 artistic people, 2 creative people, there are times when you have to butt heads at some point with the creativity piece of it. So how do you navigate that? Do you separate your artistic side from being a couple, or how does that work? Because I know a lot. I mean, Trudy and Oscar, Trudy too, and Oscar Torre are acquaintances of both of ours. But that's one question I asked them: how do you navigate that? So how do you all navigate that?
I think communication more than anything. And if, watch any of our movies, that's kind of the common thread through all of that, right? Is, hey, things are a lot better if you just talk about what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Because it's absolutely having to find the separation between like, I'm talking to you as a producer versus I'm talking to you as your wife.
Right.
But that being said, it's not always that clean cut, right? Like you don't just stop being married because you're on set.
Right.
So that sort of stuff is, actually, it's funny, we haven't actually been on set since we've gotten married. So I said, you don't stop being a couple just because you're on set, I guess.
That'll be a follow-up interview. Exactly.
But then we'll get through the next one in a couple of months and we'll come back to play ON. But it's fun because we've always been, I think, very good at talking about what we're feeling and what we need.
Yeah.
And it's just doing that in a way that's respectful, I think, allows sort of to stay on the same page and to know that it's not personal and that we just respect each other in so many ways, because we're very different.
Yeah, we are very different. I think, Rosie hit the nail on the head with communication. I think that is the crux of why we went from being friends to decidedly more. Being able to trust somebody in that way, in that capacity, to be open, and to want to keep the conversation going, and then to really respect this person and want to put them in every position, do everything that you can to put them in the best position to succeed. I mean, that's how we think about all of our collaborators, all of our team members. in front of and behind the camera. That's exactly how we treat everybody, but it starts with the two of us. We want to see each other succeed. And I think it's not about, I was talking about how, I'm not an auteur, and it's not about my way or the highway. It's about what can we create together. I think that that's been one of the really wonderful things with when Rosie got brought into the fold. I was making short films before her, but when she got brought into the fold, it was like, hey, this is the story that we're telling. This is what we're making. We want to make stuff. How can you be a part of it? How can you help it be the most true version of itself? And then when it was, hey, let's collaborate with you writing and me directing, I want to serve your story and really respect that. If something's not working in terms of the like, I won't change the dialogue, but if something is not, working in terms of the dialogue that the actors are giving you feedback, let's have a conversation about it. But let's also give you that creative autonomy to be a producer on the project too, so that you're not just this writer handing off the script and whatever happens, because I want her to feel, I want Rosie to feel empowered to defend, but then also understand when something changes, why it changes, how it changes, all that kind of stuff, so that we all are taking pride in our participation in the creation of art, as opposed to just being like, oh yeah, I wrote a screenplay, isn't it great? And it's like, no, but like, yes, you wrote the screenplay, you are the writer, you have this very clear, sort of point of view in this way. But how do we convey that? How do we make it everybody's truth, not just yours? And so that's been something that just starts with that, communication. What's really wonderful is that 2-11, our first feature, was the first time that we co-wrote something together. And that process was really interesting, because prior to that, I'd only ever written my, stuff that I was going to direct, or I'd only directed stuff that like somebody else had written twice. And so when we sat down to write together, there was, because we have completely different writing styles, not styles, approaches, that was a really fun game in patience. But because we had
it was also during lockdown, and we were
Yeah.
sharing a 425 square foot apartment.
Yeah.
So it was an exercise in patience for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And then you add creative discussions into that mix.
But just to summarize, our answers to this question, it comes down to the communication. It's not a coincidence to me that both of our feature films empirically have a very similar emotional through line. They're both about a central couple who are really good communicators, and when their ability to communicate respectfully becomes fractured, conflict arises, and the only way that they're able to overcome the conflict is by finding their way back to constructive, communication with each other. And so that was so interesting, just seeing the two different genres, but seeing how we still built this narrative around something that we know to be true, which is the power of communication in a relationship.
One of the things I want to touch on is, I'm a huge fan of like Turner Classic Movie Channel, and my wife and I, we watch movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and we absolutely love them. And there's nothing fancy about these movies, but the storytelling is really amazing in some of these movies, with like a single shot might be 5, even 10 minutes long sometimes, where you just have two people conversing and it's one camera shot. There's no dolly involved, or no, it's a camera on a tripod. But talk about storytelling. And I believe that if you have a good story, it's going to be successful if it's done correctly. But what are your thoughts on that? If you tell a good story, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be, done with special effects and so forth. What are your thoughts on the storytelling piece of it?
Completely agree.
Yeah, completely agree.
We talk about this a lot, because we are still, sort of in this low budget indie world that we're existing in, and you don't get all the toys. You have to figure out how to be scrappy and how to make the movie while also, making something you're proud of and making sure that your team feels safe and taken care of. And that's a lot to figure out. So you have to figure out from the beginning, what can we make that we can make well? Because we know right now that we're not at a stage where someone's going to give us, $1 million and all the fancy toys. What we can do is we can say, okay, we don't have all the fancy toys right now, but let us show you what we can do, just us, just with what we have. And, almost prove that, yes, you can give us the resources to make things with the fancy toys, because we understand that that's not what's important. What's important is telling a good story. What's important is characters that people care about. What's important is just a compelling narrative that's going to actually make people pay attention.
Yeah. And really just asking, we write with our producer hats on all the time. I mean, it truly depends on what the purpose of the screenplay is. If it's just to be this sort of proof of concept, proof of value as a screenwriter, of course you can write whatever you want to write. But if the purpose of writing the screenplay is to have something to produce, writing with the producer hat on is so crucial. It's what is the story? And everything that we put onto the page has to tell the story. And say, for instance, there's this really interesting piece of set deck or really interesting prop. If you take it out of the scene, if you take it out of the character's hand and the conversation is the same, then don't have it in there, because it's not serving the story and it's an expensive thing. And maybe put that money into getting Portos for people for lunch, on that day, because everybody loves Portos. They're not paying us to say that. We've seen from experience that there's a lot of value bringing Portos to set.
And if you're in LA, just go to Portos and get a potato ball and a guava pastry, and you'll be a happy camper.
That sounds pretty good, actually. I wish we had them here in Philly. Yeah,
they're fantastic. So yeah, I mean, it's about telling the story and what's important in that way. And it would be great to have. I really liked actually what you said about the toys and stuff like that, and how everybody wants them, but you may not have any of them, and sometimes you'll have one, but it's like a hand-me-down that somebody else had. And how do you do what you can with that thing and appreciate what you have and the opportunity to do what you love doing, which is storytelling. It's not necessarily storytelling with a gimbal. It's not necessarily storytelling with a Steadicam. It's not necessarily storytelling with that. It's storytelling. And so how do we take what we have at our disposal, write for that, get to the truth that way? And sure, I mean, if there's a special effect, the last short film that we shot was the first time working with, fire, or first time working with a couple of like fun other elements. And it was just like, is it serving the story? Yes. Okay, great. Let's figure out the practicalities. Let's figure out how we can still incorporate those elements, but not give them any extra time. The way, especially with something that's like unsafe, like fire, in terms of potentially causing an unsafe working environment. Once again, go back to the work, go back to the prep, all of those conversations ahead of time. What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? Talking it through with the first AD, talking it through, what is the stunt? What's happening? What's the coverage? Who's actually going to be interacting with this thing? What are our safeguards to make sure that it goes out in time, so that you can incorporate a stunt, but not take any extra time shooting it? It's because of all that time you've invested ahead of time.
And the team. I mean, we talked a little bit about our team at the beginning, and the one person we didn't mention on the technical side is our DP, Nicholas Ferrero, who we've been working with on, God, I don't even know how, since before 2-11.
Well, I've been working with him
since college.
Since I was a sophomore in college. He was a freshman.
He went to Syracuse as well. So we've known him since college, and we've done most of our recent projects together. And one of my favorite things to watch on set is Nick and Nate working together, because we'll go to him with an idea and it'll be like, okay, here's what I want to do. Can we figure out how to execute it? And then the two of them will really just put their heads together and get creative and figure out how to make these really cool shots happen. Like one of my favorites in Surprise is there's the scene when the surprise party is starting and the camera kind of moves through the party across different groups of people. And it's like one shot that's showing you and moving with everybody, and it's constantly motivated by story. And that's just like the two of you being so in sync and being able to figure out how to make that very complicated choreography happen.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta tell you, the one that really hit me was, well, there was two. I mean, there was a part in the movie where the guys are outside talking about what just transpired. And then there's also the group of girls talking in another location. And just the way the sun was hitting the girls sitting there, it was just beautiful. I mean, it was just gorgeous. The shot was just gorgeous. And I mean, it just hit me like, wow, this is like amazing. How you achieve that shot. I know probably light had a lot to do with it and the time of day and whatever, but to achieve that shot, I'm sure you only had a short time to get that shot before the sun actually went down. And it was just amazing to me. Just the cinematography was, like I said, it didn't distract from the story. That's why I loved it so much, because it was so beautifully, it just draws your eyes into it. Then you can concentrate on the story by that, the way it was shot. So yeah, kudos to your DP on that. It was just fantastic.
Yeah,
he's also the editor of the project.
Yes, he's amazing. His expertise added so much value to this film beyond our wildest, imaginations, and it's just wonderful because he's he's an incredibly good director, a great director of photography, and an incredibly great editor. But what I love watching him is being a leader of his team, being a leader of the camera team, being a leader in giving direction for Grip and Electric team. And he's efficient, and people respect, he commands that respect because of his work ethic and because what he's able to do and stretch a dollar, and he's awesome. So he's really an amazing partner of ours, and we're very thankful to be in this journey alongside him, because he helps us achieve these things and make them the way that we want to make them with the resources that we have now to make them, and he makes it look seamless. So
Nate just officiated his wedding.
I did
a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Well, congrats to them. I just want to ask for some advice for our listeners who are also indie filmmakers and actors and so forth. And, from your experience making, 10 projects right now, 8 short films and 2 features, what can you tell somebody out there that's like a young me who had a handy cam and went out and shot a short film? But what kind of advice can you give somebody that has a story, but just doesn't think they can get it out there because they don't have the money?
I mean, I think it's to do what you did with the Handycam. You opened this by giving us the loveliest compliment on the technical quality of our project. But we wouldn't have had a project of this technical quality if we hadn't made a bunch of things building up to this quality. Start with your iPhone. I know that it sounds trite. I know a lot of people say it. Start with your iPhone, figure out what you like, figure out movements and framing and storytelling and what you like. Get together with friends. If you have a project that you're precious about, it doesn't have to be that one. Just write something fun that you can go shoot in an afternoon. And then next time, maybe you rent a slightly, bigger camera. Maybe the next time, you go and you shoot it at a friend's house where you have a little more production value, but just keep making things. Because if you save all of your energy and all of your time and all of your learning for this one big project, by the time you get on set, you're not going to have that experience. And you're going to be so precious about it because you haven't learned what to prioritize and what not to prioritize, that you're going to have a really hard time getting what you need. So take the time to learn what is and isn't precious and work your way up to getting things to the quality you want them to be at. Because it's not going to be like that on your first project. That's the reason that we make short films. That's the reason that we make our way up. We start with what we can make.
Yeah, that was really well done, and I'll just give a short answer because you said a lot of the stuff that I would have said. Just keep going, and your first project is just that. It's your first project. It doesn't have to be the thing that puts you on the map, but it is the thing that begins your journey and getting those repetitions to refine your skills, to learn what works and what doesn't work, and to ask yourself those critical questions of, if this works, why does it work? If this doesn't work, why does this not work? So that the next time that you have the opportunity to do that, of course, when you're starting out, you have to make that next time for yourself. But you've gone through that experience of making that first project, and then you've made a second project, and so on and so on. And so you get to that point, as Rosie said, where, we are so proud of every element of surprise, but surprise didn't happen. That's not our first project by any means. And so just keep going and understand what the value of each project can be. It can just be about making something. It can be getting those repetitions, and that's enough.
And be proud of that. I'm proud of all of these things we've made. We've grown on each one. There are moments of all of them that I'm proud of.
Yeah. So many lessons learned from each and every one of them.
Well, before we go, Rosie, I want to ask you this question. I'll ask you too, Nate, but Rosie, when it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to leave behind when people think of Rosie Grace?
I want to make stuff that's made people happy. Like, there's the bigger stuff, right? Obviously things that make change and make people feel seen and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, if I've made something that made someone smile or feel seen or took their mind off something for a moment in the day, if I just contributed that little bit of net good, I'm really happy with that. And I just want to, and then that I got to make stuff. That's the other legacy, just that I got to make stuff. Yeah,
that's great. How about you, Nate?
Yeah. Probably similar. I mean, it's hard to quantify legacy, I think, until you're there and you realize like what that value can be. I think I would love people to, when they think of Nate, to think of somebody who cared, just somebody who cared about what they were doing, and did everything they can to make the most out of any opportunity that they were given. And yeah, That's what I'd like my legacy to be, is somebody who cared about what they're doing.
I love them. Both those answers were great. And, how can people find you on the internet, and how can they find your work? And want to make sure that you give them a chance to look you up here. So how do they find you?
Absolutely. Okay. So first and foremost, Surprise is being released digitally across streaming platforms, your Amazons, your Apple TV, all of those on August 13th. So first and foremost, please watch the movie. We'd love to know what you think about it.
It's available for pre-order now on Apple TV.
Yes. And for just us, if you want to follow along with what we're making and doing, we're on Instagram at Small Tall Prod. The name comes from the fact that Nate is a full foot taller than me. So we decided Small Tall Production. I'm the small, he's the tall.
Yep.
I love it.
And we also have a website, which I believe is
smalltallproductions.com.
smalltallproductions.com.
And our debut feature film, 2-11, is currently available to stream for free on Tubi and for rent on Amazon and all the other streaming services that Rosie already mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, and just keep an eye on our Instagram, because we might be coming to a film festival near you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So definitely follow them on social media and check out those great films. And again, congratulations on your success on those films. And really, I'm a new fan. So thank you for being on the show and taking your time. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity, Dave.
Thank you for having us. It's so nice to get to know you, and any friend of Shooties and Oscars is a friend of ours.
Yep.